Now, Madam President, the Amendment 411 would prohibit the U.S. Department of Agriculture from funding the construction of ethanol blender pumps or ethanol storage facilities, the latest request from the ethanol lobby. By prohibiting funding for these pumps and storage facilities, we will prevent American taxpayers from spending over $20 billion to convert the 20,000 gasoline pumps currently under construction. $20 billion. During today's cloture vote on the ethanol tax credit amendment, some members that voted against cloture cited concerns with the procedural tactics used to bring up the vote, the unfairness of ending the subsidy in mid-year, therefore pulling the rug out from underneath the ethanol industry, and that it was somehow premature to end over 30 years of subsidies unless it was coupled with further funding for ethanol infrastructure construction. I hope my fellow critics of the ethanol tax credit have taken notice of this new tactic over the past few weeks. For ethanol supporters, this debate has been about where and how to prop up the industry in the future, not whether or not the ethanol industry deserves future taxpayer support. It's time to say enough is enough. This industry has been collecting corporate welfare for far, far too long. For those of us that have been fighting against these handouts over the last 2 decades, it's been far too long since we've had a full debate on this issue. As a reminder to some of my colleagues of how this debate in support of corn ethanol handouts has shifted over the years, I'd like to read a portion of a floor statement on ethanol subsidies that I delivered on March 11, 1998. I said, Mr. President, let me just take a moment to try to explain why we have such generous ethanol subsidies in law today. The rationale for ethanol subsidies has changed over the years, but unfortunately, ethanol has never lived up to the claims of any of its diverse proponents. In the late 1970s, during the energy crisis, ethanol was supposed to help the U.S. lessen its reliance on oil. But ethanol use never took off, even when the gasoline prices were highest and lines were longest. Then in the early 1980s, ethanol subsidies were used to prop up America's struggling corn farmers. Unfortunately, the usual trickle-down effect of agricultural subsidies is clearly evident. Beef and dairy farmers, for example, have to pay a higher price for feed corn, which is then passed on in the form of higher prices for meat and milk. The average consumer ends up paying the cost of ethanol subsidies in the grocery store. By the late 1980s, ethanol became the environmentally correct alternative fuel. Unfortunately, the Department of Energy has provided statistics showing that it takes more energy to produce a gallon of ethanol than the amount of energy that a gallon of ethanol contains. In addition, the Congressional Research Service, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Department of Energy all acknowledge that the environmental benefits of ethanol use, at least in terms of smog reduction, are yet unproven. These facts are as true today as they were 13 years ago. In fact, we now have a better understanding of the negative effects corn ethanol has on both the environment and food prices than we did 13 years ago. But it's important to note that while attention is being paid, and rightly so, to eliminating the unneeded and wasteful ethanol tax credit, the corn ethanol lobby is seeking a new ethanol stimulus package by attempting a congressional runaround to continue bilking American taxpayers out of their money. Instead of seeking approval from Congress, lobbyists have convinced the Department of Agriculture to change the rules of the Rural Energy for America program to pay for new gas station pumps at retail stations at the expense of solar, wind, and energy efficiency projects. In fact, the President has announced his goal to fund the construction of 10,000 ethanol blender pumps and tanks within the next 5 years, a down payment on future ethanol stimulus spending. Supporters of ethanol corporate welfare are happy to tell you that if they get their way, these 10,000 blender pumps and tanks will be the tip of the iceberg for billions in new federally funded corn ethanol infrastructure development. To be perfectly clear, not content with government support to subsidize ethanol, protect it from competition, or require its use, Lobbyists now want American taxpayers to pay for the construction of pumps and holding tanks at retail gas stations. Of course, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is happy to comply with the industry's requests to fund infrastructure construction. On April 8, 2011, Secretary Vilsack issued a rule that would classify blender pumps as a renewable energy system, qualifying it for funding under Rural Energy Assistance Program. When Congress created the Rural Energy Assistance Program, it had no intention of paying gas station owners to upgrade their infrastructure, further subsidizing the ethanol industry. Furthermore, as a bonus to any gas station owners to take advantage of the grant program, once the federal government has built the blending pumps, holding tanks, retailers will be eligible to receive the ethanol tax credit, double dipping in the federal treasury. How expensive will this ethanol stimulus be if the special interest lobby gets its way? According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, an ethanol blender pump and tank costs an average of $100,000 to $120,000 to install. With over 200,000 fuel pumps currently operating in the U.S., it would cost over $20 billion to convert them all. This is one stimulus project that we can't afford. As for those concerned about the lack of support for wind and solar projects, a recent Congressional Research Service report indicates the tax credits and subsidies for solar, wind, and geothermal power will cost $8.62 billion from 2008 to 2012. The ethanol tax credit alone would cost over 3 times more, $26.5 billion, allowing the Rural Energy for America program to continue funding blender pumps and tanks will only continue this trend. For my colleagues that really wanted to end the corporate welfare handouts to the corn ethanol industry, but were concerned over the process issues surrounding the ethanol tax credit vote, are concerned about the fairness of ending the tax credit in mid-year, you can rest assured that those concerns do not apply to this amendment. It's time Congress took a step towards ending unneeded and unnecessary payouts to a robust and strong industry. In a time of fiscal constraint, when all are being asked to make a sacrifice, we should expect more from leaders in the private sector than seeking to continue handouts, quote, stimulus projects from the federal government. Madam President, I was disappointed, obviously, in the vote that we took concerning the ethanol subsidies, and I know probably what the vote on this amendment will turn out. The message is, Americans, we're really not serious. We're really not serious about heeding the mandate of last November to stop spending, to stop wasteful projects, to stop the unnecessary projects such as ethanol subsidies. We're going to go out and we're going to spend $20 billion of your tax dollars in your local gas station to install a pump. My friends, no wonder the American people, according to recent polls, are disillusioned, disappointed, and pessimistic about our future. This vote on this amendment will confirm an ample and adequate reason and understandable reason for that pessimism. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.